Hello, my PBC family and friends. Pastor Brian here again with you. I just wanted to share a quick thought with you this morning from one of my favorite actual stories in all the Bible, and many of you will be familiar with this as I start to share it. But actually, there was a different thought that came to me from this story this morning, or maybe I just developed it a little bit more in my mind. I don't know. Maybe I've shared this thought before, but that being said, I just want to take you to the Word real quick, read to you a story that we're all familiar with. It's when Peter walks on the water. But there's a couple things I want you to catch as we go through this morning. And in particular, one point I think that is so vital for us all right now. So what I want to read to you is just from Matthew's account of this story in Matthew chapter 14. And we'll pick it up there. I guess we'll pick it up about verse 28. And you remember that Jesus comes walking on the water in the night, and the disciples are scared because they're in the boat, and they're thinking it's all sorts of different apparitions or whatever the case may be. Lord calls out, says, "Be of good cheer, it is I." And then Peter responds, and I love this. Peter says in verse 28, "And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me to come unto thee on the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind was boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him, and said unto him, If, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. Okay, that's where I'm going to stop at this morning. So the thoughts I had, you guys know some of my thoughts about this story. Some of the things that I've told you before, that sometimes what is left out of Scripture is by a story can be just as telling as what is put in. And what I mean by that is this. Like in this story, for example, we see Peter gets out of the boat, completely trusting, putting his faith in Jesus Christ. Gets out of the boat, he starts walking on the water. And then he gets distracted by the storm. Now, we've heard 1,000 sermons about this, right? Oh, when you get distracted by the world, you begin to sink, and that's absolutely true. But what is interesting to me in this story, you've heard me say this before, and this is not the point I'm going to drive at this morning, but what is interesting to me in this story is it never tells us how far Peter sank in the water. It just says when he took his eyes off of Jesus because of the wind, because of the storm, the boisterous waves, when he took his eyes off of Jesus, he began to sink. It never tells us how far he sank. And I think that's important because it doesn't matter how far you've sunk. The point is you cry out to Jesus, he stretches forth his hand, and he picks you up. Now, that's just the kind of the bonus for us this morning, so to speak, right? But with what we're facing and where you're at right now and whatever may be going on in your life right now, the one thing I want to encourage you in is this. There's more in this story than just meets the eye. And what I mean by that is this. Of course, Jesus reaches forth and he takes him when he begins to sink and he cries out. He puts his faith in Jesus Christ, if I can put it to you that way. He put his faith when he got out of the boat. And when he was walking, he was still believing in Jesus. He just got distracted. And real quick, I want to take a side note, just belief in Jesus. It's an easy word for us to say, and sometimes I don't think people really understand what that means. To place your faith and your trust in Jesus Christ is the idea, and his completed work on the cross for your salvation and nothing else. I mean, nothing else. Not your church, not your leaders, not yourself. Only in Jesus Christ and his completed work upon the cross, his death, burial, and resurrection. That is what saves. As a matter of fact, in Acts 16, when the Philippian jailer comes out, after the earthquake and stuff, says to Paul, he says, hey, what must I do to be saved? He says, believe and thou shalt be saved. And that's the point. You don't have to do extra works. You don't have to do extra special things. We just believe. We trust in Jesus Christ and we are saved. Now, our salvation, our trusting, our belief is going to drive us to live and to behave a certain way. That's where the works part comes out. It's not a part of our salvation. We don't work for our salvation, but we understand that that's where part of that comes from. And so, because if I believe my car will drive, then I'll get in it, turn it on, and drive in it. But if I don't believe my car will drive, I won't get in it, I won't turn it on, and I won't drive in it. Okay, back to what we were talking about now. So Peter gets out of the boat, believing in Jesus, trusting in Jesus, gets distracted by the storm, begins to sink, cries out, never says how far he sank. I know for me, I told you guys this 1,000 times, I think the minute the tops of my feet are starting to get wet, I'm freaking out a little bit. If I'm walking on the water, I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'd be stubborn enough to wait till my knees. Who knows? But who knows how far he sank? Maybe he was all the way up to his neck. I don't know. But the point is that he cried out and Jesus saved him. Now, this is the part I want us to really draw from this morning, though. As it goes on from there, I think a lot of times what we miss is this. He, of course, says, "Hey, oh, you little faith, why did thou doubt? Why didn't you just trust in me? Keep your eyes on me." But then he goes on from there. And this is such a cool verse. Verse 32 says, "And when they were come to the ship, the wind ceased." See, I think sometimes we think about the story when Peter gets taken from the water and Jesus picks Peter up from the storm, that we think that the wind ceased right then. The storm was over. No, they still had to walk back to the ship. The storm was still raging. The wind didn't cease until they got back to where they belonged. In other words, here's the point. We might be in the midst of a storm in our life right now. We cry out to Jesus. He's going to walk with us in that storm. And that's the thing that is kind of, for lack of better terms, not there, but is there. Jesus walked with Peter in the storm. All the way back to the boat. Back to where the safety was. Until Jesus got Peter to where he needed him to be. To where they were going. The storm didn't cease. But he had the faith and the trust to be able to hold on to Peter. Peter had the faith and the trust in Jesus while Jesus held on to Peter. So let Jesus hold on to you as you walk through this storm. And when you get to where we belong, when we get back, when we get through this storm, the wind will cease. Well, that's just, I hope, an encouragement to you guys today. I know it was to my heart this morning. This storm is going to end. Guys, it's going to end. And we can look forward to when the storm does. But while we're in the midst of the storm, let's hold on to Jesus' hand and walk on the water with him. Well, I love you all, and I pray you're all doing well. Again, give us a shout out. Let us know how you're doing. If we can answer any questions, do anything for you. We love you, and until we gather together again, bye.